Lawyers of Reddit, what is the dumbest thing your client has done to ruin a case? The first post today is by BC Linger. I was on a jury where the defendant showed up in court day one wearing the exact same outfit as the unknown suspect in the video of the crime. It only took a few seconds before the judge immediately called a stoppage. All lawyers went into the back with the judge and they came out like 7 minutes later and announced the defendant had taken the plea deal. Wild. Oh shit, I forgot. This is my crime outfit. It's my crime outfit because it should be illegal to look this good. And because I wore it when I robbed that bank last week. You'd think the lawyer, having seen the evidence, would have made the defendant aware before going into court. I think they're also partly to blame here. The next post is by Big Blind Max. Not an attorney, but one of our clients baffles me to this day. He had multiple cases, including aggravated battery and drug possession. At the insistence of the dude's family, we moved heaven and earth getting him a bond, so that he could get out of jail and live with said family until the case was over. The whole process took weeks. Less than a day after getting out, he was caught stealing $16 worth of batteries from Target. Bond revoked. To be fair, the line between stupidity and compulsion is blurred with this one. For anyone who's curious, we immediately ordered a psych evaluation for him. He was found competent, but it also confirmed that he had mental health issues. The aggravated battery charge ended up being dropped, and he took a plea for time served. It really makes you wonder what he must have done with those batteries to be charged for aggravated battery.
I'm joking. I'm joking.
The next post is by Cylons in a Police Box. Not a lawyer, heard this from a guy I used to work with. His brother-in-law got injured at work and was suing for a hefty sum. Case was pretty much open and shut. All the evidence was in the brother-in-law's favour, until the brother-in-law started talking. They asked him to tell them about the day of the accident. Brother-in-law started out fine until he gets to the part where he approached the piece of equipment that injured him. He tells everyone that there was a note on it stating that it was out of order. Brother-in-law then said that he discarded the note and started up the piece of malfunctioning equipment as he had a job to get done. That easy win was discarded faster than that out of order sign. I'd argue that it could still be ambiguous. He could have only realised after that it was an out of order sign. Really, the company should have made sure that nobody was even able to use the equipment, especially when they employ someone with this guy's level of intellect. The next post is by Love Peace Hope-ish. I was defending a client who was accused of trademark infringement. He thought he knew better than the intellectual property attorney assigned to his case, me, and so he went on his company's website to defend himself by basically confessing to what he did and claiming it wasn't against the law and the trademark owner was a, quote, woke baby who needed to either, quote, learn the law or, quote, get back in the kitchen and make her husband a sandwich. Wow, provoke them after admitting you're guilty. What a great idea. I wish I could say I was joking. I was one email away from negotiating a settlement that would have allowed the continued use of the complaints mark with limited restrictions and a very nominal fee. Little to say, she saw his website, told us to go f*** ourselves, and dragged it before a judge. My client lost big. His lack of self-control cost him thousands of dollars. It must be so frustrating when they get exactly what they deserve, but you're the one representing them. The next post is by You Asking. Not an attorney, worked in a firm. This was a workers' compensation claim. A guy falls down at work and claims he injured many different body parts, including his shoulder, knees and back. We tell him to stay off social media. This was no problem, he doesn't use social media. At trial, he tells the judge he used to be a spin class instructor, but since the accident, he cannot teach classes anymore. Well, turns out he continued to teach these classes after his injury. This was proved by the hours of surveillance the insurance company did, showing him teaching and vigorously riding in spin class. How did the insurance company know he was still an active instructor? The guy posted his full teaching schedule on his Facebook page. His potentially very lucrative claim was quickly changed to a fraud claim against him. Oh, I don't use social media. Except for when I do, of course. There's a similar story in the comments by Shoddy Reception about another guy who forgot to scan for cameras. We had a guy claim he dropped a pallet on his foot and broke it during work. Okay, he goes to the doctor and gets a cast. 5 days later, he calls in that he got the cast wet and had to cut it off. So he gets a new one. 5 days later, it was too tight and he had to cut it off again. I met him at the clinic to be the co-rep. The doctor tells him to work in his shoe. We had a private investigator rent office space from us, so we had him followed. A few days later, we had a video of him putting up a chain link fence, alone, in a pair of sandals. Of course, we sent that to work comp. He skipped town before he was supposed to meet with them. The next post is by Hair of the Down Dog. Not an attorney, but I was in the jury for a 3-defendant murder trial. We sat through weeks of testimonies, and from the sheer amount of direct evidence the state had, it was extraordinarily obvious that Defendant 1 had committed the crime. Defendant 2, Defendant 1's brother, and Defendant 3, Defendant 1's girlfriend, were much less obvious, and we were being asked by the state to consider circumstantial evidence that left most of us feeling like we had to make some leaps to draw the conclusion they wanted us to. That is, until Defendant 3 decided to take the stand. Defendant 3's attorney did a very good job of painting her as the victim of abuse. Her attorney had us feeling sorry for this poor, unintelligent woman that had been groomed since she was 16 by a man 20 years her senior. From the attorney's narrative, Defendant 3 was basically Defendant 1's slave. He controlled what she wore, what she did, and even who she talked to. He even made her get a tattoo saying Defendant 1's name's property. We even saw a text about Defendant 1 killing Defendant 3's puppy because Defendant 3 had made him mad about something small. We then saw texts from Defendant 3 to Defendant 1 cheering him on after he'd sent her pictures of a bloody knife, the murder weapon, but Defendant 3's attorney had us questioning if those words were her just playing the role of supportive partner, so Defendant 1 didn't come after her next. We were starting to believe she was terrified for her own safety, and that is why she did not report her boyfriend. I mean, clearly this guy is a maniac, and it seemed reasonable that she just didn't know how to escape him. Then, both of the other defendants' attorneys and the DA tore her apart on cross. They made her look argumentative, tripped her up in multiple lies, and by the time they were done, based on her own testimony, it was pretty clear that she did in fact know the victim and had been the one to plan the entire murder. We even started to feel like she was the one that manipulated Defendant 1, more so than he manipulated her. Then, the other defendants did not take the stand. When we went to deliberations, we all discussed how bad of an idea it was for her to testify. We had decided that Defendant 1 was guilty on all counts within the first 5 minutes. However, during the cross-examination of Defendant 3's testimony, we decided against her almost as quick. We decided that while she did not physically commit the murder, she had conspired and was just as culpable. Defendant 2 took the longest. We all felt pretty strongly that he was somehow involved, but that the DA had not met their burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So we had to return a not guilty verdict on all counts. For clarification, Defendant 1 and Defendant 3 were both found guilty on multiple counts. Defendant 2 was found not guilty. Christ, that was longer than I expected. I do feel a bit disappointed that we don't get to know their sentences. I really want to know that the girlfriend was penalised for lying so profusely in court. OP adds a pretty amusing bonus fact in the comments. There was a point where Defendant 3 was claiming to be legally blind and therefore could not see the evidence in front of her. The DA bought her a magnifying glass. D3 held up the glass to her eye and looked around the room. When she turned to the jury box, it was hard to suppress our laughter as we saw this giant eye staring at us. She had a couple moments like that throughout the trial. She thought she was smarter than the attorneys, and it resulted in some truly silly moments. The next post is by School for Sedition, and just a warning, it's a bit dark. The client was part of a group of active paedophiles. One of the others killed the boy while several were involved with physically abusing him. Our guy's defense was that he was just a voyeur, so although he was there, he was not involved in the actual murder. He was on bail the whole time, including the trial, up to when he decided to change his story and say instead that he hadn't been there. His sister later gave evidence that he'd come home that night covered in blood. he got a long time. Hopefully long enough for him to get exactly what he deserves in prison. Okay, the final post today is by a deleted user. Not my client, but the petitioner's attorney's client. The man claimed workers' compensation and threw the kitchen sink at us, meaning he basically listed just over half of his body parts on the claim petition, stating that he injured each one. He was full of shit and my firm knew it. Anyways, we were going to trial, and the day before we ran one more social media search. This absolute f***ing moron posted a video of him winning a breakdance competition that was only a few months after the alleged work incident. Never saw a quicker dismissal in my life. How hard is it to not enter a breakdance competition while going through court proceedings for workers' compensation? There's a comment here by Snakebite which has a similar story. I used to do some pro bono workers' compensation cases. I once had a case where the employer's attorney didn't show up, which, as you know, means an automatic victory so long as the petitioner doesn't say anything. When the judge asked my client if he wanted to speak, and as I vigorously shook my head no, he went into a long ramble in which he revealed his injury did not occur at work and we lost with no opposition, snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. Thank you very much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have any similar stories, please leave a comment. I would love to see them. I would also very much appreciate it if you liked and subscribed to please the algorithm gods, and I'll see you in the next video.